All right, welcome to the Atheist Experience. We are live. It is Sunday, April 3rd, 2016, just 2 days after International Atheist Day, April Fool's Day. And one day past my birthday, which was March 31st. So
happy birthday.
Yeah. I don't feel any older.
I tried to put a happy birthday on your Facebook page and it wouldn't let me.
Probably, yeah. I guess I got it set where I'm the only one that can host there. Anyway, we are live. This is a live call-in television program sponsored by the atheist community of Austin, dedicated to supporting the atheist community and separation of religion and government. And we take calls from theists and atheists alike, talking about what people believe and why, whether or not we should, whether or not it's a good thing, and anything else that happens to pop into somebody's mind. I'm Matt Dillahunty, hosting you this week, and joining me, John Iacoletti. Yay!
Good to be back.
That's where the audience on the other side of the glass is actually they're on their feet right now. You just can't see them. But yeah, it's for more information about how to contact the show, you can see the telephone number shows up right down here, and we have 6 lines, and they're all full right now. So if you're trying to call in now and getting a busy signal, that's why. But you can also go to atheist-experience.com, which is the website for the TV show, and you'll find a section there on how to contact the show, including a nice, neat little green link that says call the show. And if we're on the air and you click that, you'll have basically the same sort of setup as you would for Google Hangouts or Skype or anything where you're having a conversation over your computer or mobile device. Please have some headphones on so that we don't get that loop of hearing ourselves on a massive delay. And make sure that your audio equipment and everything is set up properly. The call screeners will probably check that with you. If they can hear you, we can probably hear you. But so how have you been?
Been doing all right. Some little bug has been going through our family the last couple weeks, so we've all been kind of down for the count, but feeling better.
Cool. I was at a magic auction this weekend, and there were several people who were sick, and I was like, no, please don't get me sick, because tomorrow, after I'm done with tonight's show, I've got to do some shopping and packing, because about 7 o'clock in the morning or so, I leave on a flight heading up to St. Louis, where I'll be going out to St. Charles Community College. The Secular Student Alliance there is having me up to do some magic and talk about skepticism. So we'll have a good time there.
Cool.
But it's a call-in show, and we want to make sure we get to everybody's calls. As a reminder, when the show's over, people involved with the show get together and go to Threadgills, which would be right up that way, and then you turn, and it's just a little bit up the road on your left if you were coming from the building. If not, you can look up the address once they put it on the bottom of the screen.
It'll be along there any minute now.
So we got Sam in the UK. Thanks for waiting. How you doing?
I'm good, thanks. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well.
Okay, shall I?
Yeah, did you have a specific question for us or something you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, well, I think there is scientific evidence for God.
Okay.
I think a lot of people, especially atheists and even most of the believers, they don't really see the evidence that exists for God.
So when you say there's scientific evidence for God, I'm wondering, I mean, you're aware at least that the bulk of experts in science wouldn't agree with you.
Yeah, I understand that. I understand where they're coming from. I've looked at some of the research on
So I guess the big question is, what is it that's convinced you and why, and do you think any of the rest of us should be convinced for the same reason?
One of the things I was looking at was the formation of planets and stars.
Mm-hmm.
Initially, when you read the journals or news stories, you read about the theory is that dust is in space, and then dust sort of maybe collapses, or there's a gravitational instability, and then that causes the dust to come together, and then they clump together, form rocks or form bigger masses, and then they attract more and more mass, and then you get a sort of maybe asteroids, planets, and stars.
Yeah, and so you don't think that can happen, or I'm not understanding what you're getting at.
Well, I mean, if you read that, you think that's logical, makes sense. So that's how stars and planets were formed.
It is one. So we don't know exactly how every planet is formed, but we have observed accretion disks from stars in various states. We have observed planets in different ways. In other cases, there may be an asteroid or some passing body that comes through that affects things and changes the way which particles or which objects are going to come together, and are they ever going to get enough mass? But it is a model that is supported by the observable evidence and explains why the planets, for example, in our solar system tend to be roughly in a plane. And the objects that aren't within that plane, are captured bodies. But by all means, continue.
Yeah, well, that's just a model. I mean, that model is just based on observations, you see.
Yeah, it's a model based on observations. What else would we do?
Yeah. So the way I see, if you are saying that this is the model where dust collapses and forms, can form a bigger mass, then you should be able to take dust together and see if it forms a bigger mass. And scientifically,
well, you do realize we don't have the capability to do experiments on solar systems in various states of formation.
It's not about solar systems.
But you pointed out that this was a model based on observations. That's what science is.
No, yeah, I understand.
And so if the science that you're pointing to has an explanation that is entirely naturalistic and consistent with all the available evidence, if we find out that we were wrong, of course, science will change because there'll be new observations and the model will change. But you're pointing to a model and saying, oh, it's just a model based on observations. What's confusing me is that you called in to point out that you think there's scientific evidence for God, and your first example has no God in it.
Yeah, I'm getting to that.
Okay.
So I'm saying that initially, I mean, what do you think would cause dust to collapse together and form a bigger mass?
Gravity.
So you think that mass
gravity and inertia and motion and collisions. Yeah.
Yeah. Current science say every mass has gravity. Would you? I mean, I think you take that as fact, or do you think that's just
that there's a connection between gravity and mass? Yes.
Yes.
So you think that as fact, or is it theoretical?
Well, so
it's measurable.
Is it measurable? So
when you say, do you think it's a fact or it's theoretical, that seems to carry with it some baggage that I don't necessarily buy into. Models explain facts. The observations are the facts. And so we have these observations about our universe, about the laws of physics, and about how these things interact. And we have observations from other, similar solar systems and stuff. And we have models that we've done. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'm trying to say, the models show things at the higher level, at the sort of the kind of macro level, the big level. But when you look at the models at the lower level, at the level of dust and sort of small mass, it just doesn't work out.
Okay.
There's been scientific.
Where's your scientific paper showing that it just doesn't work out?
Because I've read it online. There's been researchers, proper scientists, who wrote papers,
So let's assume, Sam, that they're correct. That all of the current models that describe the formation of solar systems from accretion disks of stars are in fact wrong, and hang on, let me finish. And we'll assume that the people that you're pointing to who say that this just can't happen are correct. Let's just go ahead and make that assumption. We'll throw out the acceptance of the current models, and we'll go ahead and accept the individuals who you've seen their papers online who say that this just can't happen. What do we know? How does that get us any closer to confirming that a God exists? Wouldn't we then be in a position where, yep, we were wrong, we just don't know what the correct explanation is?
Well, this is, for me, this is one of the evidences of God.
Well, I'm sorry, but that's boneheaded, because you've gone from, we have a scientific explanation, to, hey, somebody else has pointed out that this scientific explanation can't be right, but nowhere does that get us to, therefore, there's a good reason to believe that a God is involved. You have to show that no naturalistic explanation can do this before you could even hope to get to the supernatural, or you have to demonstrate that the supernatural is real and exists and confirm that it is in fact responsible. So when you say science confirms God, what you're really saying is you found some people who are science-y who object to science, and you find that to be consistent with God, but it's not evidence for God.
No, what I'm saying is that the evidence, the fact that dust and small matter, yeah, cannot clump together, yeah, by gravity.
You
or
think
by
that's a fact? I
it's a fact, yes. It's
Okay.
a fact.
Okay. So even if, like I said, we'll go ahead and assume that it's a fact that this can't happen the way we've described it.
How do you get to
Yeah.
God?
So I'm saying this is one of the evidence of God, yeah, because basically this.
That's not evidence for God.
No,
That-
what I'm saying is stars.
Sam, let me ask you a question.
What's that?
If something has not been proven to be possible, does that mean it's impossible?
No.
Okay. If something,
saying we just
hang
don't-
on,
we don't
hang
know.
on, hang on. If something hasn't been proven to be impossible, does that mean it's possible?
So what was that?
If there's something that has not been proven to be impossible, does that mean that it's actually possible?
I'm not sure what you. Which one
It's the exact same question as the first one, only I've flipped possible and
Yeah,
impossible.
but why are you flipping it around for? I mean, I'm trying to make it simple.
Because it's important to realize that these are the same.
What I'm trying to say, yeah. Thing is, stars and planets, yeah, they don't form.
I'm not asking about stars and planets.
I'm saying they don't form naturally.
If
I'm trying to
something
say, yeah,
hasn't,
not
Sam,
natural.
stop. I asked you if something hasn't been proven to be possible, does it mean that's impossible? And you said correctly, no.
That's right, yeah. That's right.
And now I've asked, if something has not been proven to be impossible, does that mean it's possible? And it should be just as easy for you to correctly answer no.
Yeah, but
Right?
I don't see what's that got to do with it.
I
Because
know you don't understand. That's my point.
what I'm trying to say, yeah, it's not the way stars and planets exist. Yeah, it's not natural. That's what I'm trying to say.
How do you
It's not
know?
natural.
How do you know that it's not natural? You just agreed that because something hasn't proven to be possible doesn't mean it's impossible.
Yeah, but I'm saying what it's not natural using the current thought. No, you're using the current knowledge we have of science. Using the
Correct.
current knowledge of science,
Correct.
it's not-
Correct.
it's not
Hooray,
possible.
Sam! Hooray! You've just now acknowledged that all you've demonstrated, assuming we agree with your science that you're pointing to, which I don't, but you've just acknowledged that all you've demonstrated is that it's not possible given the current information.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, do you think we know everything?
No, we don't.
Do you think it's impossible for us to find a naturalistic explanation for that?
Yeah. Well, in this case, yeah, with the current science, yeah, we can't explain this. That's all I'm trying to say. Yeah, in the future, yeah.
Okay, so if we can't, Sam, no, you can't finish. Sam, if you agree that we currently can't explain it scientifically, then please begin with the premise, science cannot currently explain this, and end up with science confirms God.
No, I said.
That's
I didn't say
impossible.
science confirms God. I said this is one of the scientific evidences I believe is for God.
Okay, well, I don't. Because
Well,
I
that's
don't
fair
buy
enough.
into arguments from ignorance because they are fallacies.
No, but how is this a fallacy?
How is it a fallacy? For the same reason that you weren't able to easily identify that something merely
Yeah, but
not having been... Okay, go ahead.
You're trying to say, yeah, in the future, yeah, we can find out anything.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not, Sam. I'm not saying in the future we can. I'm saying we are in a position where we don't know that we cannot. And you are in a position of saying, I don't think we can, and so I'm going to leap to God as an explanation. And that is fallacious.
But I'm saying this is one of the evidence that I believe.
It's not one for it. If this is one, and you lined up a million other ones of exactly this same soundness, you would still have zero because you haven't got anything for this one. You can't just say science doesn't have an explanation for it. Therefore, I'm going to put this in the evidence column for God. It doesn't work that way.
Why not? Why doesn't it work that way?
Because that's a fallacy. It is the argument from ignorance fallacy.
It's not argument from ignorance. This is what we currently know, yeah.
No,
And
Sam.
If you don't
Stop.
If you don't know how something works, then the answer is you don't know how it works. It's not. That's evidence that there's a God.
No, I'm saying this is one of the evidences of God, yeah.
No,
So
it's
when
not.
you-
It's not a one. It's a zero.
How is it evidence for a God?
because
That you
there's-
can't explain something.
Yeah, because at the moment, yeah, we only know there's gravity, and there's other ways of dust and matter getting together, and the current scientific experiment shows, yeah, that things just don't form together, come together to form a bigger mass.
So
That's what I'm saying.
So how do you get to a God from that?
Well, I said this to me, yeah, it's like something strange. You know, the current science to explain it. We only know.
Yes, I would agree. If we threw out actual good science and accepted the bad science and got to the point where we didn't know, it would seem strange. I agree, it's strange. How do you get from strange to God did it?
Well, so this is what I'm a follower of the Quran, and the Quran says that it's God who brought the earth together. And
I don't care what the Quran says. Why should I believe what? Okay, Sam. Why should I believe what the Quran says? You don't get to just use that as evidence. Yeah. You have to actually substantiate it. I've got a book too. It says the Quran's bullshit.
Yeah, that's fine. You can accept it as whatever you want. But for me,
okay. But do we care about what's true, Sam? Because I do.
Yes.
Okay. So if we care about what's true, then you need to explain why we should care what the Quran says.
Because this is one of the things it mentions, and it turned out to be true.
Okay, so because some book mentions something that happens to turn out to be consistent with reality, we're then justified in accepting what the book has to say about other things? No. So if we take all of the things that the Quran says that you think happen to match up with the scientific reality of the world, and we put them together in a box, and we take all of the rest of the Quran and put it together in the other box, what good is that other box?
No, it's basically for people who are looking for evidence, scientific evidence here. If things
the Quran is not for people who are looking for scientific evidence.
It is. Well,
no, it's not.
Well, no, but you're saying that's your opinion. But
okay.
My opinion, it is.
It's not scientific evidence that the Quran says something.
Please point to a scientific organization that uses the Quran as their foundation.
No, you don't have to have some scientific organization here point the Quran.
No, what you have to have is evidence and an argument for why we should consider the Quran to be a science book.
No, I'm not saying the Quran is a science book. I'm saying
yes, you are. You're saying that when we don't know something, and the Quran no, shut up and let me finish. You're saying that if we don't know something, and the Quran says that God did it, we should use that as our science book when we don't have anything better.
No, I'm saying no. I'm not saying that. I'm saying you use that the best. The Quran makes a claim that God did X, Y, and Z.
Okay.
And then you test that claim.
How do you test the claim to find out whether or not God did X, Y, or Z?
Well, this is what I'm saying. This is one of the things. Yeah, God says that He created the planets and stars.
Yep.
So if stars and planets here are formed naturally via gravity or with the sort of natural means that we know of.
That we know of. Once upon a time we didn't know anything about lightning. Does that mean that Thor is throwing lightning bolts?
Yeah. But
how is that a test? How is that a test for God?
But I'm saying this claim turns out to be true at this moment. This claim turns out to be true for this time.
No, it's either true or not true. You can't just say that we don't know enough right now, and so we can't prove it wrong, and therefore I'm going to believe it.
I'm saying according to the current scientific evidence, it turns out to be true.
No, okay. The Quran says that God created the planets and the stars.
Yeah.
Okay. How do you test that?
Well, we can't create it.
Okay, so what?
So what? At least this shows, there's so much strange going on.
I can't build a car, but that doesn't mean that the person you claim built the car. I can't grow a tree, but that doesn't mean that there's a supernatural being that created the tree.
You're going on a different kind of.
Yes, I'm using science and logic and reason, and you're appealing to a book.
For me, this is one kind of pointed to God. Because this is so much strange for me.
It's not pointing to anything. If the answer is I don't know, that is by definition pointing to nothing.
No, for you it's not. Yeah.
For anybody who understands logical argument and reasoning, if the answer is I don't know, that is not pointing to something. That is an absence of pointing to anything.
Okay. For me, the Quran makes a claim, that God creates the planets and the stars.
Yeah.
And for me, the current science, shows there's so much strange going on with mass not coming together naturally with gravity.
Yeah, you're basically claiming your own personal truth, and I'm not interested in your personal truth. I'm interested in the actual truth, and I'm wondering why you're not.
Yeah, but I've explained it. For me, this is one of the claims the Quran makes. And
if you say for me one more time, I'm going to hang up, Sam. I promise you. If you say for me one more time, I'm going to hang up because I just explained. You can sit here and say all day, for me, that's true. For me, this is real. For me, that's true. And anybody can say that about anything. I want sound logical arguments and supporting evidence. That's it. That's all I care about. I don't care about your book until you give me a reason to care about your book, and I don't care about your opinion about your book unless you give me a reason to.
Do you believe in evolution? I mean, not evolution. Do you believe in common ancestry?
Yes.
So you believe, that over millions of years, living organism, they sort of evolved through reproduction, to form different kinds of varieties of living organisms around the world.
Yes.
Yes.
Now, what's your scientific evidence for that?
The scientific evidence for that is the fossil record, the DNA record. We can keep the bulk of it's off of DNA, but for example, we can demonstrate that we have a common ancestry with the other great apes by looking at chromosome 2's fusion.
Okay, you got two evidences here. Fossil evidence.
Well, that's not two. That's not two evidences. Do you not understand? Have you never been to a natural history museum anywhere that has all of the species, or not all the species, but all of these varied species in different forms? We have fossil record in different places around the world, and the model is so profound that it was able to make predictions about what we would find and where by saying that if our model and understanding of evolution is correct, we should be able to go to this region in this layer of rock and find Tiktaalik, is what we ended up naming it, which is a mediate species between two other things, between sea-based fish and fish with legs that walked on land. And we went out and we dug in that place, in that rock there, and we found it. That is a profound strength of the model of the theory of evolution by natural selection. This is not two evidences.
Let's look at the fossil evidence. I mean, how does animals? I mean, what is common ancestry is where you got a lineage of animals,
Yes.
who can reproduce with each other. Is that correct? So from generation to generation.
Yes, speciation is generally defined as the point at which they can no longer reproduce.
Okay, so tell me, how does the fossil record show that these animals can reproduce with each other?
The fossil record doesn't show which ones of them can necessarily reproduce until you get into the DNA of it.
Okay, so how did DNA evidence? How does DNA prove that one species can reproduce with another species?
I'm not here to explain DNA and reproduction to you. You should actually go take an actual science course, and then when you're done taking it, you can go find the scientists writing fringe papers that you claim refutes it and use it as evidence for God again. As long as you are going to continue engaging in the fallacy parade.
I've looked at the DNA evidence here.
Have you? What expertise do you have in the field of DNA and reproduction?
Well, I've looked at research.
What expertise do you have?
Well, why do
I don't care what Joe Shit the Ragman or the nut at the end of the block has said, and I've looked at the evidence. Do you have some relevant expertise here?
No, why do I need relevant expertise?
Well, if you're going to say that the experts are actually incorrect in their conclusions, it would be helpful if you had some expertise that you could demonstrate.
No expert has ever come out and said that you can use DNA evidence here to say that in this species here can reproduce with other species. No scientific whatever professor or whatever researcher has ever claimed that here, and it's not possible. I've Googled
really?
it.
So if a scientist looked, for example, at my DNA and my wife's DNA, they can't determine whether or not we can reproduce? Or whether or not we're likely to be capable of reproducing?
Right. They can't.
You're absolutely wrong. As a matter of fact, scientists have looked at that and determined that for certain specific reasons, my wife and I aren't actually capable of reproducing because we know about this stuff.
No, you see, it comes down to, the people try to use DNA here to work out their lineage. And they found out, beyond your parents, when you get to sort of maybe grandparents level and above, you really can't use DNA to work out, what your lineage is.
You're absolutely wrong. And I would recommend pay the $200, pay the $200, go to 23andMe and have your genetic profile be done. And you'll be amazed to discover what science can actually tell you about this. Now, there's plenty of things that the science can't tell you because we don't know anything. But, Sam, even if you're right, you have done nothing to demonstrate anything at all remotely relevant to the question of whether a God exists, because there are millions and millions of people who accept the facts about scientific evolution who also think there's a God. And even if, Sam, even if all of evolution turned out to be wrong right now, you still don't have any evidence for a God.
Well, this the evidence is that things, one of the evidence is that life just doesn't come about naturally.
How do you know?
Because people.
How do you know? How do you know?
Scientists have tried creating life.
So that's irrelevant. The fact that somebody hasn't Sam.
Why is that relevant?
Because you just said this does not happen, and your evidence was for it was that it has not happened yet.
You see, what
that isn't evidence that it doesn't happen.
No. What you're saying, if someone exists naturally, for example, let's say you got water. If you combine water, hydrogen with oxygen, you get water. Is that right?
Not on its own, no. There's a process from which you get water from hydrogen and oxygen. It's not like you just take a hydrogen atom and two oxygen atoms, or two hydrogen atoms and an oxygen atom, and try and stick them together.
Can you create water in the lab?
Yes.
Okay, but why can't you? If that's what I say, humans could do that, but why can't do the same with life?
Why can't humans fly?
Why? Because we haven't been designed to fly.
Okay, but are you saying it's impossible for us to ever fly just because we haven't flown before?
Naturally, to fly naturally, as in having living organisms like wings or something, that's impossible for us.
Well, it's impossible for our descendants to eventually have wings and fly. How did you determine that?
We can't determine that. We can't.
Okay, thank you. So if you can't determine it, then how could you say it's impossible?
No, but I'm saying with the current science,
I don't. No. It's just you're saying that because it hasn't happened, it can't happen.
No,
that's what you just said. Scientists haven't been able to do this, therefore it can't be done. That was your argument.
Yeah, but it's like, scientists could, one day, I don't know, create, I don't know, a massive, animal that could, I don't know, devour the earth. You could make anything you want up.
I'm not making anything up. I'm pointing out your fallacy. Your fallacy is like me sitting here with a die and rolling it, and you saying that because I haven't rolled an 8 yet, it's impossible for me to roll an 8. And you haven't demonstrated that. You're just pointing out that it hasn't happened yet. And in this case, it's even worse. In this case, it's even worse, Sam, because you're saying scientists haven't been able to do X in the lab. Therefore, not only will scientists not be able to do X in the lab, but it's also the case that it's impossible for X to have occurred naturally. And the evidence is completely in opposition to that. All of the evidence points to the conclusion that it did, in fact, happen.
No, I think you're making the mistake of saying, okay, predict the future. You're trying to say, predict the future, and say, this. Try and say, say this is not possible, that's not possible.
You're the one saying what's possible and not possible.
But based on what? Based on the current science?
Okay, Sam, we're done. You don't understand logical fallacies. You don't understand logical reasoning. You don't understand science. And now now I have people in the audience who are begging me just to hang up on you because it's a complete waste of time. We've been over this. And when I put it in simplest terms of, hey, just because something hasn't been proven possible doesn't mean it's impossible, you're okay with saying no. And then when I show that this is the exact fallacy, the claim that you're making, then you want to do a tap dance and start talking about how scientists haven't created it in a laboratory, or how I'm the one that's talking about what's possible or impossible, when you're the one doing that. So you've got exactly 30 seconds to give a sound, valid argument for the existence of God, or we're done.
No, well, I'm saying it's just I find it's disappointing. Yeah, you have an attitude of you just want to point blank just refuse to actually want to believe. All you want to do is point out. Yeah,
I point blank won't believe until there's a good reason for it.
Yeah, there has to be a reason to believe, not just this could be the explanation, which is the problem with your methodology. You say if you can poke holes in somebody's theory, then that somehow goes towards proving that God did it, and that's the fundamental flaw in what your argument is.
The problem is, like I said, it's I don't know. It's
That's what I thought. We'll see you later. Thanks, Sam. All right. We've got Dustin. Thanks for waiting in South Carolina.
You say Dustin?
Yes. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Sorry.
I can't understand you. What's that?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, that's better.
Wonderful. Sorry, I was on speaker. Is this Matt and John? Is that right?
Yes.
Wonderful. You guys were the hosts that were on when I first called in several months ago when I first announced my atheism. So nice to talk to you guys again.
Hey, welcome back.
Hey, thanks. I was hoping to get some advice on how to respond to a common Christian claim that I've encountered many times, and it seems absurd to me, but I never quite know how to address it. The claim is this, I'm sure you've heard it many times, and that is, human reason is flawed, it's not always perfect, therefore we can't know anything with absolute certainty without the possibility of being wrong.
I agree.
Therefore we can't know anything.
I disagree.
And all opinions are valid. That's where they jump to.
Sure. Well, it's really easy. It's really easy, Dustin.
Yeah.
The knowledge. Sure. There's no useful, accepted, common definition of knowledge that requires absolute certainty at all. I don't think you can get to absolute certainty about anything. I don't see any path to absolute certainty. I also don't see that it's relevant, because when we talk about what we know, we're not talking about what we're absolutely certain about.
Yeah.
And generally speaking, I don't care if somebody claims to know it, because when they say, I know this, what they're really saying is that I believe it really, 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 really strongly. So the issue isn't, can we get to absolute certainty or not? Because I'm willing to concede right off the bat, we can't, as far as I can tell. The issue is, do we have good reasons to believe certain things? Do we have sufficient justification to warrant accepting that the proposition is likely true, very likely true, etc.? That's all that matters. Yeah. And plus, if this is coming from theists who are claiming that they have this infallible source, that there's a God who can't be wrong, and they try to use this as how they can know something when we can't, then the best example I can come up with is if you have a dirty filter and you pour clean water through it, that water doesn't get cleaner and it doesn't come out as clean as it went in. And so even if there was a God who knew everything was perfect and was absolutely certain couldn't be wrong, if he's dumping that knowledge into the flawed human vessels that cannot reach absolute certainty, then by definition, they still can't be certain. They can't be, their God doesn't make this possible. And so recognizing that we're not going to get it absolutely perfect, absolutely right, is completely irrelevant to the question of whether or not we have good reasons to believe something or not.
Mm-hmm. Do you espouse the definition of knowledge as justified true belief?
I'm not a fan of it, but I understand that that's probably the most common one, and it may be one of the best.
It seems so circular.
Well, yeah, there is a problem, because you've got to define justified and what counts as justified, and this is where you get into people saying, well, I think it's justified, like our last caller. Yeah. Then you also have the problem of true, where there's an assumption that you've confirmed that it is in fact true, which is so there. And if you do a study on JTB, justified true belief, as knowledge, you'll find that all these objections are really common in the philosophy community, and that's why, first of all, I don't care what somebody claims to know. I care about what they believe and why, what those justifications are. But if I use my own definition of knowledge, a belief is something, a proposition that we accept, and you can believe for good or bad reasons, and you can be wrong about your beliefs. And knowledge is us expressing a confidence in those beliefs. And generally speaking, I would say that when I say I know something, I mean that I believe something, and it would be worldview altering to discover that I'm wrong. I'm not claiming I can't be wrong. I'm not claiming I'm absolutely certain. I'm just saying, if I say I know this, I'm saying this is so well founded and so central to how I view the entire universe that it would be, worldview altering to find out that it's not the case.
So it almost sounds like you're saying we're not doing ourselves any favors by even using the word knowledge in these types of conversations.
Yeah,
to even say I know something is kind of pointless.
It can be, but I don't think it's pointless to express a level of confidence. What is pointless is saying, I don't just believe it, I know it, because that gets us nowhere.
That doesn't make it any more true. Just because you claim to know something. Or less true, for that matter.
Right. So not to switch topics completely, but so the precept who says, if you could be wrong about anything you claim to know, then you don't know anything. Does that change anything? Like, if you're already saying that,
so they're right.
To know something is is irrelevant, then
they're right under their definition of knowledge, but I don't give a damn about their definition of knowledge, and I went through this when I debated Cy. If he wants, if they want to say, well, if you acknowledge you can't be absolutely certain, then you can't know anything. Well, I can't know anything under your definition, but I can under mine, because under mine, the only thing required is that I have justifiable confidence in this belief. So we're just talking about something you believe incredibly strongly and hopefully for very, very good reasons. But even at the end of the day, I can say, okay, let's just go ahead and say you're right, that I don't know anything. Now, do I have justifiable beliefs?
Sure.
And what they'll get back to is they'll say no. They will say no, that none of my beliefs can be justified. And now we get to set aside the whole conversation about knowledge and talk about how we go about determining whether or not something is reasonable. And the only option that they have, and this is what Cy tried to do, is to say, your belief presupposes truth, and truth presupposes God. And the only response that needs to be made to that is, that's what you say, but I don't accept that. Please justify. Please justify that there must be a God in order for there to be any truth or for there to be any rational beliefs.
Yeah. Well, they can't know anything by their definition of knowledge either. I mean,
yes.
Yeah, they just convince themselves that they can. They've convinced themselves.
I know. Yeah, I know they're convinced.
I just went through this in a video that I released for March about. I think this one was about borrowing from their worldview was what the video was about. Because the precepts and the other people who talk about this will constantly make accusations that we have to borrow from their worldview in order for ours to make any sense. So if you head over to my YouTube channel, you can go to patreon.com/atheist debates. All the content's available there for free. It's also on my YouTube at youtube.com/sans.deity, DEITY. And the latest video on borrowing from their worldview covers all that.
Okay. Cool. One last quick question, if you don't mind. Do you think, in a way, that they might be right, the precepts, when they say that knowledge presupposes truth? I mean, we are when we're searching for truth, we are kind of assuming that there are things that are true and things that are false. Is that a valid? Is that a presupposition? Yes.
So I can't demonstrate the truth behind the things that we call the logical absolutes. That's a presupposition. I don't currently have a solution to the problem of hard solipsism, this idea of whether or not I am the only mind and you guys are all just a fiction. I think I have some pretty good arguments against it. Like, for example, it would be I'm either incredibly unhealthy or I'm actually sharing space with other minds, because there's no way I would make a call like the last call to me if this was all a product of my own mind. Also, I learn things, and I learn things from what appears to be other people who know things I don't. And so in order for it to be the case that I am in fact the only mind, then I must have all this knowledge and am suppressing it from myself so that I can invent a fictional character to teach it to myself. Or I don't have the knowledge and I just make it up on the spot. But that would mean that I'm simultaneously writing every book and every story and every song that has ever been written. And to me, it just seems incredibly unlikely that that would be the case. While I can't prove I'm not the only mind, I think it's far less arrogant and far more reasonable to live as though I'm interacting with other real people, in part because until somebody demonstrates I'm not, that's the smart move.
Yeah. Is there any common ground that can be arrived at with the presuppositionalist? I feel like if you're going to have a productive conversation with somebody who makes those claims, you've got to have a starting point with them. Can one be found?
Well, I've tried. Cy and I both agree.
What's your best shot?
Cy and I both agree on identity, non-contradiction, excluded middle. My position, though, is that those can't be justified. They're just a presupposition. And his claim is that he can justify them by pointing to God. So the point at which we start agreeing is on identity, non-contradiction, excluded middle, these foundations of logic. We are in agreement that they are true and inviolable. But he just thinks that he has a justification, and the other presuppositionalists do as well.
He says they can only come from God, much in the same way our previous caller said that, particles form together, and that can only be from God, since the other explanation wasn't true. It's presupposing that God is required, and then using that to prove that God exists. It's a circular argument, I think.
Yeah,
that's where they lose me.
Well, they presuppose God.
Presuppose God, and then use that to demonstrate the existence of God.
That God exists.
Yeah, and so if the beginning for them, if you're talking to somebody who's unwilling to have an honest discussion about this, like Psy isn't, if they actually have this presupposition of God is a necessary figure, then no, there's not any common ground, unless you're willing to accept that God is a necessary figure, and I'm not, because I think that's something that needs to be demonstrated.
Right.
Well, me either.
All right, thanks,
Okay,
Dustin.
I'm sorry. I know we're out of time. Can you tell me one more time where I can find that video you mentioned?
Patreon, patreon.com
Yep.
/Atheist Debates with an S at the end. That's my Patreon channel with, I don't know, a bunch of videos up there. And one of the last 3 that was posted, which should be available to everybody in the public now, is called Borrowing from the Christian Worldview, I think.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks, guys, for your time.
Thanks, Dustin.
Although I probably did most of the video while we were sitting here talking, covering the same ground. But yeah, and as a reminder, since I keep forgetting to do it, after the show's over, some of the folks involved get together, go to Threadgills. I'm sure they'll put the address right up on the screen, probably while I'm waving my finger, unless the crew has fallen asleep in the back room.
It actually is on a loop, so it'll come around.
So you'll see it. Maybe I should say it when it's up there next time.
There it is.
No? Oh yeah, there's my thing. Oh no, that's not right. It's not patreon.com/atheist.
Atheist Debates.
Atheist Debates. All one. Anyway, Jim was calling about.
Oh, similar topic. Are you there, Jim?
I'm going to let Jim go because I think he's in the bathroom, and he wanted to call in and talk about presuppositionalists and the foundations of knowledge. So we'll just have him
see prior call.
Yes, watch the show once it's posted. Daniel, how you doing in Pensacola?
Hey, Matt. Hey, John.
Hey, Daniel.
Oh, first things first, how's the spoon doing?
It's still a spoon. All these years later, it is still a spoon.
Good. I'm glad to hear that you didn't throw it out, because what if it becomes a fork?
I'd have a hard time finding it.
Okay.
Because I would be expecting it to still be a spoon.
What you would recommend somebody, such as maybe websites or keywords of researching the historicity of the Bible and when it came about, and so on and so forth.
So, yeah, there's a number of good books. I'd actually recommend, just to make it easy, start at Wikipedia. Do a search for the canonization of the Bible. Do a search for scriptural authorship or authority. The nice thing about Wikipedia is that while it can be wrong, because anybody can go in there and edit it, there are also links to other resources down there. There's some good books from people like Finkelstein and those who have done back and looked at archaeological research related to the Bible. But there's also books on the history of the canonization. Bart Ehrman has a book that's one of my favorites, and it's called Lost Christianities, plural, and talks about the things that didn't make it into the Bible. There was also a website, earlychristianwritings.com, which is a pretty good list of the New Testament stuff and its dating and authorship and what scraps we have. But there's a lot. A quick search for history of the canon, history of the biblical canon, will get you information on basically how the Old Testament, the Jewish Bible, was put together, when it kind of became the de facto canon, and then how the New Testament was formed as well. And when that list came around after Athanasius basically included it in his Easter cyclical or encyclical, and then everybody just kind of said, yep, that's the list we're using. But there's some cool fights about what didn't make it in there. The Apocalypse of Peter, the Shepherd of Hermas, a number of other books that were generally considered to be inspired at the time, but didn't make it in during all the debating.
Dragon slaying?
Dragon slaying? I don't know.
Where he makes a poisonous ball and he throws it in the dragon's mouth?
That one's not right clicking with me, but...
Okay, well, disregard it. Also, I was wondering what your view on determinism is.
Well, you want this one? Because that's too big of a topic.
Okay.
I probably am a soft determinist. I'm just not sure. I think the evidence points to the fact that we're in a universe that isn't consistent with hard determinism. But I don't know that we have enough information. People start talking about things like quantum indeterminacy and stuff, and I don't know how that works in.
What was that?
What was what?
Quantum what?
Indeterminacy.
Indeterminacy. All
There's
right.
a number of things that people will raise to talk about how the universe is not hard deterministic, but soft deterministic, and that distinction alone is enough for 10 shows. At the end of the day, though, I am not really bothered about which of the two we're in, because no matter what, I'm in the position that I'm in and have to deal with the world that I'm in. So this gets into conversations about free will, and you'll have people say, well, free will is just an illusion, and I'm okay with that. I'm generally, I tend to side with Dan Dennett as a compatibilist, saying that there's not a contradiction between the idea of free will as we actually use the term and determinacy. So
I'd say you have free will the same way that America's a free nation. It's not anarchy and absolute freedom, but same usage.
I can't say you're wrong, but I would have to think about that analogy quite a bit more before I signed on for it. All right. Thanks, Daniel.
Well, hold on.
Oh.
Add one more thing.
All right, go ahead.
You're still there?
All right. What would you say is a simple, exact contradiction that's not up for interpretation or being poetic that's in the Bible?
A simple
as in,
contradiction
like,
that's not
you
up
don't
for
have to
debate
go
or
into
interpretation. I don't think that there is such a thing, because there's always the possibility, as long as people can interpret it so that even when it clearly says one thing, they can interpret it so it says something else. I don't know that you could point to anything that's not going to end up being prone to interpretation. Because people will say that Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 give contradictory accounts.
I could
that depends.
Like the one about in the Gospels where it said to leave your sandals and your cloak, take your rod, and the next Gospel says leave your rod, take your sandals and your cloak.
Yeah, and see, these things, you'll get people pointing out, well, these are irrelevant scribal mistakes that don't have anything to do with salvation. It's not a tenet of the religion for you to believe which one's the Easter narrative about who got to the tomb, when, what did they see, what was there, what wasn't there. This has long been completely irreconcilable. People have tried to come up with a simple description of the Easter narrative that coincides with all four Gospels, and it simply cannot be done. But if you allow for interpretation or shrugging off things that aren't particularly relevant, then people do it all the time.
Yeah. Where do you stop?
I think there's a passage that may be in Corinthians, but I'd have to look it up, where it seems to say, in fairly short order, two extremely contradictory things, like whether or not miracles are given for evidence. And the wording is this. Well, they can say, yeah, but that's an error because of the King James translation, and this is an idiom that is, Aramaic and lost to us. So my big thing is, you'll see these, like those, you'll see charts on the internet that show all the contradictions. A lot of them are garbage. A lot of them are, we're just going to try and nitpick and stretch and do whatever. Here's the thing. Let's imagine that the Bible has no contradictions at all.
Right, I get you.
So what?
Right. And I was having a discussion with my brother, and basically when you're talking about the core tenets, he had brought it up because he mentioned that, well, within conversation I mentioned that, he mentioned that Allah, the Quran is stating like they're technically the same God, but they're different in attributes, so they're not the same God. And I was asking him about when it says if you believe in God, you go to heaven, or the biblical narrative of God. But which, like, if you have one thing that's incorrect, are you believing in the right one?
Yeah, I don't have an answer, because there's as many God concepts as there are believers, pretty much. So what a lot of religions have done to get around this is talking about there are a handful of minimal things that are required. These are the tenets of the faith. These things are required for salvation, and everybody within the religion can have different opinions on the other things. What's the correct list of 12 names for Jesus' disciples? Well, they're pretty consistent across the board. There's a little confusion over the Judases after the first Judas kills himself.
Well,
I don't know why they.
What could you
grab
still?
another
I'm
Judas.
sorry, I don't mean to cut in.
I don't know why they'd go with another Judas, but at the end of the day, the names of those people don't matter. They have no impact on whether or not the story is essentially true and whether or not you're going to be saved. Because there's no claim in the Bible that, in order to be saved, you have to know all the names of the books of the Bible. You don't have to know the names of the apostles or anything like that.
Well, I'd say there's still an issue there, because if it's just the core tenets, you can take those core tenets and just write another book where all the smaller details around it is different. Would that still get you into heaven? You see what I'm saying?
I don't think anything's going to get you into heaven.
Would it be a different God if the smaller details are different?
I think it has been. I think even without changing any details, it's a different God today than it was 100 years ago, or 500 years ago, or 1,000 years ago. It's not just the details in the Holy Book that determine this. It's the details in the communities and the societies and the religious sects all around it. So Christianity isn't what it was. It's been dragged kicking and screaming from the Dark Ages, and that's why you can have.
So you could technically say they don't believe in the.
Well, that's why you can have Catholics, for example, who accept the authority of the Catholic Church and will say that they accept the Catholic Church's moral position on abortion and birth control, and yet the overwhelming, like 90-some-odd% of Catholic women use birth control, and a good chunk of Catholics are supportive of pro-choice legislation, so they accept the church's teaching on abortion as immoral, but they are not willing to make it illegal in the United States. This is partly from Chris Matthews and his discussion with Donald Trump this week, is how this popped into my head. And so you have what the book says, then you have what the book means. We don't know if we can ever actually get to that. Then you have how the book has been interpreted by different sects, and then you have the influence of the non-adherent culture all around that, such that we no longer keep slaves, we don't burn witches, we don't stone homosexuals, we're not particularly nice to them in countries that are overrun with bigoted Christians, but we are sometimes nice to them. And that's why you can have somebody like the Reverend Barry Lynn, who's supportive of church-state separation, and the Phelpses, who, well, are not. Actually, they might be. Of all the hideous things that they support and advocate, they might actually be okay with church-state separation because they like the Constitution.
Yeah.
Well, I've watched everything online. I've watched every one of your sit-downs, everything to back when you had hair. Are you ever planning on doing any videos on determinism, free will, or absolute certainty?
You did a free will one, didn't you?
I've done some on those subjects. I don't know if I'll do them with the Atheist Debates Project, but that's something completely separate from the Atheist Experience show. So just email about that, and we'll see if I get to it. Thanks, Daniel.
Thank you.
That's a good time to bring up one additional point. Last week I talked about how not all the hosts and co-hosts agree on every little thing. It's just not going to happen. So don't saddle John with what I've said, and vice versa. But also, while I am the main host of the show, I also do a lot of other things. So the Atheist Debates Project, the talks and lectures, the magic stuff, all that's completely separate from this. I'm not president of the ACA. I'm not on the board. I don't make decisions about those things. So I'm doing what I can to keep all of my lives, all of my fun in my life that it happens to intersect separate. So don't blame the Atheist Experience if I say something stupid, and vice versa. Not that would ever happen. All right, who we got next? We have Diablo.
Hi.
I'm not accepting that that's your actual name.
Actually, I get mail by that name.
You get mail by that name?
I do.
All right. Is it the one that's on your driver's license?
No, I have a different name.
Right. So yeah. That would see that's the kind of argument that gets into the propaganda style arguments where you're kind of sketchy about something and then somebody offers a piece of information that would seem to support the idea that you're wrong, and thinking about what questions to ask next to find out whether or not you're being deceived. Anyway, thanks for calling.
I do go by the name, though. I'm not trying to deceive you.
Oh, no. It's fun. It's a bit of fun.
My question really has to do... it's kind of a deeper question, but the surface of it is the idea that people within religion, and I'll point to Christianity because I think that's where it happens most, at least within the U.S., they use this idea that nothing good can come from outside of their religion. So it's almost like, if you're a non-theist and you're serving, that's just something that can't exist. So you see that it's almost like they try to suppress it. You see parades where non-theists try to assert themselves and say, hey, I'm here. You have the whole no atheist in foxholes. You have all these efforts that basically, like when you get out of the military, like the VFW, they try to indoctrinate the entire process with religious ceremony. I've seen mines where people are pointing, see, look, they're all praying, in this formation. It's almost like they're trying to pretend like we don't exist. And I want to say...
I don't know that that's... I don't know that they're pretending that we don't exist. I think most of them... So we know the atheist in foxhole thing is not only false, and actually we had a military member in uniform sitting in the audience up until a couple minutes ago where they probably had to run off to stand watch and serve the country. But not only do we know that it's false, I think this is just something people intuit, that in their lives, when there's nothing else that they can do and they feel helpless, they reach out to a God. And they just can't believe that other people don't do the same thing. And they're correct. There are people who are non-religious who, when the chips are down, I'm sure there are many of them. And we talked to somebody on the phone last week that talked about how they still have that impulse to want to reach out. But there are others who don't. And personally, if I was in a foxhole, I would not want anybody praying. I would want them focused out and watching our asses so that we can actually respond to the threat reasonably. Cowering down there praying, I don't think is something that I would consider a virtue. But I was at a veterans event this past weekend, and before the meal they had a prayer. And the one thing they did do was, ask people to either, bow your heads or look up or whatever your religion requires of you. Now, they still did a prayer to Jesus, and they still had the assumption that everybody there was part of some religion. Mm-hmm. And many of them are surprised when there's a godless heathen who's there, working his butt off to volunteer for different things for these veterans. I understand the frustration with it. I'm far more worried about the evangelical encroachment into the military, things like we've seen at the Air Force Academy and other places where they're pushing forward a specifically evangelical Christian agenda, and where people who don't fit into that mold are not getting promoted, or they are the ones who are a lot more likely to get into trouble or get extra duty, or the theists who buy into that and go to Bible study are the ones that get favoritism, etc. That's the type of thing that I'm more interested in eliminating first, and then moving forward to, hey, if we're going to have some kind of prayer at the event, it would be nice if, at a minimum, we didn't try to pretend that everybody believed.
I kind of saw it as a symptom of the same thing, though. You're talking about the people trying to make everybody Christian in the military. Like in my personal life, I know I have people who are Christian who think I'm a good person, and to them it's almost like mind-boggling. They've got to try to bring me in the fold so that they can claim it for the glory of God or something. They just can't wrap their heads around the idea that someone can be selfless and good and volunteer and do things and be a nice person without God. That just doesn't work in their minds. It's like, if it's not godly, it's not good. And how can you point to someone you know is good and does things like serve? It's almost a contradiction in their face.
Well, there is the passage in Psalms 14:1, the fool has said in his heart, there is no God. They can do no good thing. And so at least the people who don't think we can be good at all are literally being biblical. I think almost all of them understand that we can be and are good people without God. But there is a conflict there. And it's a conflict against their assumptions. I think once they become aware of it, you're an atheist. We have heard, but you're such a good person. And so we know that bigotry exists, but it doesn't exist everywhere, because I'm happy to work with, I've worked with ministers on church-state separation. I've had a number of debates on morality where they're happy to point out that they're confident that I'm a really good person. Of course, my family knows that I'm a good person. They just think I'm working for Satan and leading everybody to hell. And somehow this is consistent with also being a good person. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, well, that's one of the biggest insults to me personally whenever I hear people say that, morality cannot exist without God. And I'm not even sitting here trying to argue the existence of God, but whatever morality I have doesn't come from there.
It tells you far more about them than it does about atheists, because it tells you they're the kind of person who just can't conceive of being decent if there wasn't some, carrot and stick or Godfather mafia boss figure standing over them, expecting them to do it. That they for whatever reason, something has gone wrong, and they can't see a good reason to do good for the sake of doing good. And it's not even an altruistic thing. It is a simple recognition that I live in this world, and if I'm willing to do good things and encourage other people to do good things, I actually benefit from that too. I managed to make it through, my time in the military without any severe trauma or damage, and I don't have to rely on a veterans organization. But I like doing things that support those organizations because I could have, and other people I know and care about can and have. And my life's not over yet, and I might have to depend on somebody else later. I don't have to be, I just want to do good for doing good's sake. There are people out there that are like that. But for the people who may even have some hidden selfish motivation, it's about making the safe bet. It's completely reasonable. It is consistent with us being human beings who care about others and would like to be cared for, and recognizing that we don't live in a vacuum. None of this is that hard, and I think when you actually sit down and talk to the people who are shocked that there are atheists who are good and have a conversation about that, I think you're going to end up with a lot more atheists. Because
my own personal view as far as the value of life really boils down to the good in the world you make around you according to your own values. What's important to you? What matters to you? What kind of difference can I make in the world around me? When you look back on your life and you say, what difference did I make? And you can point to these things, that it gives you a fulfilled life. It makes you feel like you've done something that made a difference and that mattered.
There's a sense of obligation, too. There was a lot of people who did a lot of good things to make the world what it is now that I'm benefiting from. Right. There's a sense of obligation to kind of, pay it forward. I didn't see the movie. I suppose it's a good movie. I don't know, but the concept is pretty good.
Well, I guess I had just two other quick things. One was from last week. I called in and I listened to the whole conversation, wasn't able to get through. Your co-host in that episode, I was going to ask her if she ever heard of the 7 words you can't say on television. She was sitting here talking about saying,
the Carlin thing?
Say darn. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Tracy's familiar with it.
About saying darn. Has she ever heard of that? I was kind of snickering.
Yep. No, I'm pretty sure we're all familiar with Carlin's words. The cool thing is because we're not on broadcast TV, I can actually say all of them right now. I'm not going to, because if there was some really good reason, like if I had some Christian on or somebody on who was trying to make a big stink over of style over substance, then I'd say them. But it's not a big deal today.
Yeah.
You hear most of those on broadcast
the other
TV
thing that
now.
I thought was the other thing I thought was kind of funny. I can't remember what episode it was. It was I was watching an episode where you said, "Well, why do aliens always pick somebody in the middle of nowhere in a trailer park that everybody thinks is strange?" And I was just going to answer that one. I was just going to say, well, maybe it's their version of cow tipping. They just want to sit back and laugh and watch the news reports and everybody talking about them.
It could be.
Anyway.
It could be, though, also, if you had a secret plot to come and take over the planet, I don't think popping down in New York City for your first bit might not be the best strategy. You start out in a rural area and figure out, let's analyze folks so that when we show up to take over the world, we know exactly what we're doing. You'll hear more about that on Alex Jones' show next week, I'm sure. All right. Thanks, Diablo.
Well, thanks for your time.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
On 4 is Cleary. Thanks for waiting.
Hey. G'day, Matt. G'day, John. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Very well.
Are you actually down under or just from there? Oh, you're in Tokyo.
No, I'm from Sydney.
But you're in Tokyo now.
I live in Tokyo.
I was going to say. I was going to say you didn't have a Japanese accent.
No. Well, I speak Japanese if you like, but I think we're going to lose some viewers there. I love this show. It's the best show on the whole wide web. It's just great. What a format. Prove that God exists and let the idiots flow. Good for you. I love it.
Okie doke.
I'm glad the show's going for a bit longer too. It's really good that we can get a bit of a dialogue at the start, longer dialogue between you guys. And you said last week, Matt, that you'd like to hear Tracy talk to an imam. I think you should have a whole show where it's just Tracy talking to an imam. That would be great. Sparks would fly there.
I'm in favor. I'm in favor of doing whole shows where Tracy's the only one that says anything anyway, but...
Oh, no. We can't lose you. You're great, mate. You're really good. Mate, you're the king of letting people interrupt you. I've got to say that. I hate it when people interrupt me, especially, I notice when you're just about to make your point. Anyway, you're just about to make a point a lot of times, and then the theist butts in with something completely different or changes tack, which just shows that they weren't listening in the first place. You're one big bowl of desiderata.
Although it says here that you're a theist.
Yes, I am. Yes. A big fat theist. Well, not fat, but anyway.
Well, I am, so that's fine.
You're not a big fat theist. I used to be.
No, I'm a big fat atheist.
Way to go. Well, most of my
my
nicest friends are big fat atheists. I tell you that much. Most of my friends are atheists. Some of the nicest people I know are atheists.
All right.
So
well, I'll set out to prove them wrong. What do you got for us?
All right, mate. Well, I called him because I really feel I've got proof that the Bible wasn't written by men, which seems to be the claim of most atheists, and I believe I can show you that it's been inspired from, outside our time-space continuum.
So,
the second part of that argument from atheists seems to be that if it was originally penned by the Spirit of God, it's been changed since. So I'm hoping to clear up those 2 points and give you guys in there and the viewers some food for thought, I guess.
So I guess the first thing is, I'm not necessarily, when you say inspired by God, that still means written by men, right?
Yes, written by men under the guide of the Holy Spirit.
So we're in complete agreement that the Bible was in fact written by human beings. That we're in disagreement about whether or not they were inspired by something beyond a human being.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Exactly.
How would you go about demonstrating that they were in fact inspired by something beyond human beings?
Okay, good question, as you usually ask. I want to talk about the heptatic structures in the original Hebrew text. That's groupings of 7. In the original Hebrew text of the Old Testament, especially the Torah, and then move on to some amazing things that you'll find in the Greek text of the New Testament.
Are you getting ready to drop some Bible code stuff on us?
No, well, it's not Bible codes. It's, look, I'd have to say yes to that. And all
is it about equidistant letter codes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they're very interesting. Please don't hang up.
They're not very interesting. They're not very interesting. You can find the same thing in secular books and other things.
but not in the same volume. Not in the same volume, and not something that's called subtext as well.
So let's presume for just a second, just to see if we can't save some time.
Sure.
That I'm willing to concede that if you go through with these equidistant letter sequences, you will find all the different words that you think you've found. Please justify the claim that the best or only explanation for this is that it was inspired by a God.
Okay, if you try and do this on your own, I'm willing to put up a challenge, and I will actually donate money to the atheist community there. I will go onto your website and donate money. If you guys can do, for example, what's in the first 11 verses of Matthew, the Gospel of Matthew. That's an apt one to pick. How the heptadic structures in that are set up. I will donate money, and I'll give you a challenge. I'll lay out the constraints that you have to adhere to, and if you guys can come up with a genealogy that sits with the same, so
this doesn't appear, this not only doesn't appear to be answering my question, but it is also exactly mirroring the first call we've had, where essentially your challenge is, your position is that you're justified in believing that a God is necessary for this until somebody demonstrates that a human being can do it. Well, we already have computer programs that can do it. The Bible code stuff has been thoroughly investigated. We found these codes in other books as well. If you really want to put up money for this, you should probably put up a website, and we'd be happy. I'm not going to waste any time on it, but we could direct people to it, and then somebody could collect the money. The thing is, the people who would probably be deserving of the money are the people who wrote the computer programs that make this sort of thing trivial and easy, which you can find all over the web with a simple Google search of Bible code computer generated. But at the end of the day, you are making an argument from ignorance. You're saying your position, as you've laid it out. I said, how do we get to the justification that this requires a God? And your answer is, well, can a human being do it? And even if there's no human being living right now who would be capable of doing exactly what you said, that still doesn't prove that a God is responsible.
You're also assuming that was intentionally done in the first place.
And the other aspects is that both ancient Hebrew and Aramaic, the languages that we tend to find these sorts of things in, they are not only different from modern languages in a number of ways, where modern languages are more robust, and the format of not every language is necessarily going to fall into the sort of patterns that we can do this. But in, for example, Hebrew, the words are also numbers, and then we get into different interpretations. So there's something not just specific to this process, but specific to a language. And when you factor all of those things in, what you should really be doing is saying, is it possible for a human being to put together in ancient Hebrew or ancient Aramaic a passage that has a similar sort of discovery within it at the heptadic distances? And the answer to that is obviously yes, because there's nothing supernatural about those words or those orders. And so somebody could write that exact same passage, not inspired by a God. Somebody could write a passage that is very, very similar, like somebody's transcribing this passage and they get a few words wrong. Even though they've gotten a few words wrong, those codes that you found still exist, because the words that are wrong aren't part of the ones that we circle in our magical word find for Jesus. And so if we had another passage where we changed some of those words and we still found these codes within them, is that also inspired by God?
No, but the volume of there are thousands of these throughout.
But the quantity doesn't do anything. So we have, if everybody on the planet said that God just gave them a message, that doesn't mean that God just gave them a message. The claim needs to be supported with something beyond the claim itself. And the fact that somebody can find hidden messages in a text is neat, but it doesn't, you're claiming that the reason that these hidden messages exist is because there's a God. Now, I have a counter to that has nothing to do with equidistant letter codes, and that's this.
Okay.
The message that I think that you would draw from all of this is that there's a God who's out there who loves us and wants us to know him.
Yes.
Okay. Then what the hell is he doing supporting slavery in explicit terms and then hiding secret codes that aren't discovered until thousands of years after this? And when those codes don't tell us anything and cannot confirm its existence and don't do anything to improve the quality of life or expand our knowledge, what good is that God? To me, that is a prankster God that even if he exists, while we still don't have reason for it, to think he exists, why would we want anything to do with him? If there's a God who exists, who wants me to know he exists, he can communicate with me without writing ancient hidden word search puzzles in a book that don't get discovered for thousands of years. What kind of jackass does that? I mean, if I've got a message for my kids about this is what I want, these are the rules, this is what I want you to do, and in the rule I write, you can hit your sister as long as you don't leave any marks, and then you have to put those rules together in a list and search through every 7 letter to find saying, ha ha ha, just kidding.
Oh,
I'm
man.
a dick.
No, look, I'm really sorry. You're right. I totally understand what you're saying, and what you're saying, I agree with. You're correct. I'm not that God's a dick. I don't think that at all.
Welcome to atheism.
No way.
You just said you totally agreed with me.
No, I agree with you that to have a God that hides things and then it justifies slavery and or genocide. I don't agree with those things, by the way. There are things in the Bible that I look at it and just go, "Wow, that's not R-rated. That's X-rated."
So if we were to remove the things in the Bible that you don't agree with, do the equidistant letter codes still work out? So let's say we would go through the Bible and we cut out the things that you personally don't agree with. We just remove them. Do we still get to the equidistant letter codes? I mean, what?
No, you would not.
Yeah. So.
No.
So I mean,
I believe that every letter. Sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
I believe that every letter and every word has been inspired, but
in what language?
I mean, you can say
in what language? The King James, the New International Version, the Good News Bible. All of those are
not the English translations. I'm talking about the Hebrew text.
The originals. The originals that we don't have.
Sir,
please point to any book of the Bible. Please point to any book of the Bible where we have an original.
Well, the Torah scrolls, when you write a Torah scroll,
there are no originals. There are no originals for any book in the Bible.
But it's still, well, there you go. That backs up what I'm saying. If the codes are still able to be found, no, if the codes are still able to be found, then you can say that they are exactly the same as the original.
No. That is circular reasoning because you're assuming that the codes are there in the original. What if the codes are only in the mistranslations?
Well, then human beings are smarter than God because they put them in there. Could I give you one quick
I'm in agreement there. But the problem with your argument is this. We don't have originals, so we can't say for sure what was in there. We can make some interpretations of what might be in the originals. But if you're wanting to dismiss the English translations, which, by the way, the fine Southern Baptists and Protestants have done this equidistant letter code thing within the English translations, and they find stuff as well. It does work.
Well, nothing, not in the volume that you find it in the Greek text and the Hebrew text. I'm talking about thousands.
The only differences are the differences you'd expect from the changes in the language, but you can still find the stuff. They do it all the time. Have you not read the book? Have you not read the book about the Bible code? It's at the half-price books for like $2. I almost bought it and brought it in just to laugh at it, but I didn't want to give $2 for it. So your position is all of these new translations are not actually inspired by God, and only the originals are, but we don't have the originals, so instead you're going to go with whatever the oldest copies we have are.
No, that's not my position. I believe that the translations, the English translations have been inspired by God, although in the English translations there are mistakes. There are really blatant mistakes in the English translation or transliteration of the the original text. Even the first verse is incorrect.
How can you say that how can you say that there's been a mistake from the original text if you don't have the original text?
All right. I'm only talking. Well, the original text has been protected and copied. For example of the Hebrew text, the Torah code in the Hebrew text, which is the original, and I think it's the most important.
How do you know it's original?
Because it still exists. Because the code still exists in the. You can go to any.
So your determination
anywhere in the world.
Your determination of whether or not it is true to the original is that it contains this code.
Yes.
Okay. How do you know the original contains this code?
Because if it didn't, then I mean it's beyond reasoning to think that man can actually do this. You're
assuming that it's intentional, first of all, which you haven't demonstrated. Yeah. But you're also using an original you don't have and claiming that the version you have is true to the original because you found a secret hidden message in it that you presume must have been in the original, which you presume must have come from God. Those presumptions have no justification.
Okay, can I give you an example, at least? Just one quick example.
I would be happy to let you give me an example if you can tell me why this is relevant, because every time I point out the problem with this entire... If the entire argument is invalid in structure, and each individual premise that you give us has been demonstrated to be unsound in some fashion, what good does it do to give us one more example in this argument? It cannot get us to truth. If a premise of an argument, either one, isn't true, then you know nothing about whether or not the conclusion is true or not. And so you can give an example, and I can already tell you that even if the example you gave was that in Ezekiel, the 7-letter code says Dillahunty will be an atheist who will disprove this, it still doesn't demonstrate that a God exists.
All right. Look, if you don't like the example, when I give you the example, then you can make a judgment on it. But I haven't been actually able to give you one example of what I'm talking about. I'm well aware that you're well aware of these codes and what they read and so on. But there's a classic one in the Torah that the 4 letters in the word Torah. If you count from the very first verse of Genesis, which is Bereshit in the Hebrew, if you count from the first T, you get you count 49 letters. You get the next letter, the second letter in Torah.
Why did you count 49? Why did you count 49 instead of? Why did you count 49 instead of like 40 or 37 or 28?
Well, it's 7 by 7.
Okay,
you
why?
Know yourself from your. Because 7 is God's number.
How do you know that 7 is God's number?
Because it's all the way through Scripture. It's
okay, so even if that were the case, why wouldn't we count by 7s and not by 49?
Well, 7 by 7 also is seems to be a big number with God. He likes 7s.
Sure, 3s are a big number with God, and 3s are a big number with God, and so are 12s, so are 6s,
well, not like
9s. Is there any number that, I don't know that there's any number that we couldn't find significant throughout the Bible, but at the end of the day, even if the Bible told us that 7 is God's number, it doesn't say 7 by 7 grid is God's grid.
But if you look at the heptadic structures in the Bible, you will realize that 7, even from reading the Bible, you know that there are 7 seals, 7 days of creation, 77, 7 appearances, washing themselves 7 times. 7 and 70 and 7th is all the way through the Bible. You know from your days when you went to cemetery or seminary. Cemetery is probably more apt.
Yeah, it's between it and the internet. That's where religions go to die. So I'm okay with calling it cemetery, but I didn't actually go to seminary.
Oh, really? Oh, I thought you went there. Sorry.
Nope, I learned enough to avoid it.
Anyway.
Okay, so we start at the beginning and we count up 49 and we keep doing this, and what do we find?
Well, you find in Genesis, you find the word Torah, the 4 letters of Torah written every 49 letters. At a skipped instance of 49 letters, you'll find a Tav, and then 49 letters a Vav, 49 letters you'll find a Resh, and 49 letters you'll find a Hey. Now, Russell will be able to read this because I know he reads Hebrew. He's Jewish, right? So he'll be able to read this. So I'm just asking you to check out this one, and then we can take it from there. I'll call on another day. So every 49 letters in the original text, any Hebrew Bible that you pick up, now you can go to a bookstore and buy any Old Testament in Hebrew and count these letters, and you'll find them.
Okay.
So Genesis, every 49 letters, it spells Torah.
Okay, so what?
Exodus.
Does it repeat itself after the fourth letter?
It doesn't. No, it doesn't.
So it's just the first. It's just the first four.
That's right. The first book in Genesis, you'll find every 49 letters spells the word Torah. Then you get to
wait. Every 49 letters, or just the first group of.
First group of 49. Yes, John. The first group of 49. You count from the first tav. The first word in the Bible in Hebrew is bereshit.
So you count from the beginning. You count from the first R?
No, the first tav. It's the last Hebrew letter.
So you're not even going 49 from the beginning. You're just finding the first.
So you start at the beginning, and you go until you find the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and then you start counting 49.
Yes, that's right. That's correct.
Why didn't you just start from the beginning? If this is God's number, and why wouldn't you start at the beginning and count every 49?
49, yeah.
Because the tav is God's signature. The tav, the original tav in the
How do you know
Hebrew,
that?
I've studied Hebrew.
But even if it was God's signature, where does it say that's where you should start? Why wouldn't you start at the beginning? So not only are you saying that this God has hidden a code, and he's hidden it every 49 letters, but it's only every 49 letters if you start at the right one.
Well, it's the last letter of the first word.
I don't care. This is ultimately arbitrary garbage. And if in fact we started at the very first letter and every 49th spelled out Torah, you would be calling to tell me that. And if we started at the third letter and counted 49, you would be calling to tell me that. And if we started at the fifth letter, yes, you would.
Yes, you're right. I'm sorry to say no.
Yes.
I'm almost finished, mate. Please let me finish.
No. You are finished. You are finished. I hate to tell you, you are finished. Anybody out there can Google up Bible codes. They can Google up Bible code software. They can use the software on the things that they write themselves. They can do it in a number of different languages. And this argument is something that I actually thought died out more than 20 years ago when they did the whole Bible code movies. And everybody realized it's arbitrary garbage, that even if it were amazing, even if it were something that were completely improbable, no matter how improbable it is, that doesn't give you a justification for claiming that a God did it. Because
I'd really like to finish this example. It won't take long, Matt. It really
You can do it at home. Goodbye. You can finish it on your own show. It won't take long.
People are really adept at finding patterns and things. If it had been every 7 letters, instead of 49, they would have. If it had been 21, they would have said, "Well, it's 7 times 3." Whatever you're looking for, you can find some way to tie that back to some number that you.
And the thing is, they do that. If you go out and search the internet for. By the way, we're not going to get any more callers today, so we're just going to wrap it up with this. My apologies to the 3 people who are still on hold. But if you go out and do a search for Bible codes, not only will you find a bunch of books in favor of it, you'll find a bunch of skeptical articles talking about this, and you'll see that the people who are desperate to show that this is the Word of God will find it. And it's not just 49, starting with God's letter. It's, hey, look, in this, we take the entire book and we put it all out into a big grid, and we change the size of the grid until we start to see words form. That's how this is done.
Yeah.
And you change this, and then once you find the words that, oh wow, cool, look right here, when I've got the grid to this particular size, then they say, clearly this is a message. What's so significant about this size? Well, it's 49. Hey, that's 7 times 7, so that's 7 sevens. That's God's God. That's even bigger than God. And if it had been 6 sevens, then they would have said God and man. the number of man. This is God's communication to man. So at 42, it's 7 and 6. And we get 7 and 5. What if it's not 7 at all? What if it's 3? That's the Trinity.
Yeah.
So every third letter we get something, but it could be 3 and 7 or 3 and 6. We could set up these, irregular things like that. And they do it. And they do it in Hebrew. They do it in Aramaic. They do it in Greek. They do it in English. And they've done it with Moby Dick. And the secret here is that if you look hard enough and are willing to arbitrarily change the rules behind what you think you're seeing, you can justify anything. Now, if you want to put up money so that, see if a human being can write something similar to a passage from Matthew that has codes that are similar, no matter how you want to arrange this, whether it's 49, maybe, do I get to use my own number? Matt, M-A-T-T, that's 4. That is the number of Matt. And so we will do 4 by 4 grids, which means I can't come up with a word that's any longer than 4. So I'll go with bull. And then in the second one, we'll find shit. And I will have predicted all of this. And the fact that I have predicted this and done it should not only convince people that there is a God, but that I am the God since I predicted it. Whereas the case that they're talking about with Bible codes, there's no prediction. There's no reason to go looking for this in the first place. This is mystical number magic Kabbalah garbage. And if you look hard enough, you can find and justify almost anything you want, anywhere you want. And we've seen this happen not just with Bible codes, but with every single denomination that points to the same holy book and comes up with a different answer about what they're supposed to do in their life and what God wants. All these people pretending to speak for God, when is he going to stand up and speak for himself? Some folks will be headed out to Threadgills. Right there's the address at the bottom. We will see you all next week. Bye-bye.
Bye, folks.
Hi, this is Russell Glasser, host of The Atheist Experience. You know, The Atheist Experience is made possible by volunteers and the generous support of viewers like you. If the promotion of positive atheist culture and separation of church and state are values that you hold, please consider contributing by becoming an ACA member or visiting our product page at evolvefish.com under the Partner tab. Thank you.